Welcome to the StarCraft II Heart of the Swarm campaign and lore panel. Please give a warm welcome to our panelists.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the StarCraft II panel. Lots to discuss today. Really glad to see y'all out here. My name's Chris Metzen. I'm the company cheerleader. This is Brian Kindergan. He's the lead writer on StarCraft II. It's Matt Morris. He's the lead level designer on StarCraft II. So as we get underway here, Brian and Matt are going to give some presentations on kind of story and level design. I'm just going to shut up for a while and then maybe hit y'all on the flip side with some QA time. So, Brian?
All right. Hey, everyone. I'm going to talk a little bit about the story of StarCraft II, Heart of the Swarm. But I don't want to spoil any of the great stuff that we've got planned for release. So I'm just going to touch on a couple topics and hopefully get the ball rolling for the Q&A later. If you have any questions about Wings of Liberty, feel free to ask those as well. So I wanted to start by talking about some of the characters that you're going to meet in Heart of the Swarm. And first up is Sarah Kerrigan. Now, the last time you saw Kerrigan, she had just been turned back into a human by Jim Raynor and the Xel'Naga artifact. But she's still got those Zergy dreadlocks, so that's a sign that her connection to the Swarm has not been completely severed. So it may not be the picture-perfect ending that Jim Raynor was hoping for when he carried her off into the sunset there. Kerrigan remembers very little about the things that she said and did as the Queen of Blades. It's kind of a big blur for her, but she does remember a few distinct things, and those are universally awful, awful things. So that's something that weighs very heavily on this character. But ultimately, she's going to have to explore her connection to the Swarm and even try to regain control of it. Next up is Zeratul. Zeratul's kind of gone rogue in the last few years. He's discovered a cause that he thinks is more important than all of the fighting and endless strife of the Kaprulu sector, and he's been working in the shadows to try to advance that cause. And so he'll show up in this game and continue to do that. And we have a new character named Isha. She's a unique Zerg, one of a kind, and she was created several years before the events of this story by the Queen of Blades. The Queen of Blades infested a Terran and altered her mind so that she could store thoughts and plans and ideas in her head. So now Kerrigan controls Isha, and Isha is able to help her by giving her advice or warning her of dangers, and even sort of keeping track of some low-level stuff while Kerrigan focuses on the big picture of regaining control of the Swarm. Next up is Abathur. Abathur was created by the Overmind, and he served the Queen of Blades, and now he serves Kerrigan. And his function is to evolve and improve the Swarm. And he is a master at this. He can spin genetic strands and sequences and create new creatures and upgrade them. But he's not some scientist in a lab. He's a Zerg. So the way he does this is he eats creatures or eats parts of them and breaks them down to their component parts inside his body, and then he's able to manipulate them and create prototypes. Finally, we have Zagara. Zagara is a brood mother. She is tough and merciless. She is actually the leader of the Zerg brood on Char. And so when Kerrigan shows up saying, hey, I'm the old Queen of Blades and I want to take back control of the Swarm and I want your brood, Zagara is not having any of it. She does not believe that this little slip of a human woman is in fact the Queen of Blades. So it's going to come down to a fight between these two. So I mentioned that she's a brood mother. That's a new kind of creature that we're showing in Heart of the Swarm. They were created by the Queen of Blades shortly before the end of Wings of Liberty. And they are sentient, independent creatures who are capable of controlling an entire brood. And unlike, say, a brood queen, they have independence, they have initiative, they have ambition. So when the Queen of Blades disappeared, these first few brood mothers that she had just created all sort of wanted to be the next leader of the Swarm. So each kind of took their brood and went off to different areas or fought and killed each other. So in the course of Heart of the Swarm, we've got many stories kind of woven together. Obviously, we've got the main story of Kerrigan's attempt to retake control of the swarm. But we've also got individual character stories that happen in story mode. So, for example, you just met Abathur. If you go and talk to Abathur in story mode and you keep clicking on him all the time, eventually you'll start to see that there's more going on with this character than you might have at first thought. And a plot with him starts to develop, and eventually it will have its own climax. We also have ambient stories that are just kind of floating in the background that you can pay attention to or not as you choose. They're sort of side things. And an example of that is Nafash, another broodmother. When you play the BlizzCon demo, you'll hear about Nafash and her plans and the things she's trying to accomplish and why she went off to the frozen moon of Calder. And if you're paying close attention on one of those missions, you're actually going to find out how Nafash's story ends. So in closing, I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the themes that we're playing with in this story. This is Sarah Kerrigan's story, and this woman has done some terrible, terrible things in her life, and she's had some awful things done to her. So she is a conflicted, angry anti-hero who's being pulled in multiple directions at once. And ultimately, she's going to have to make peace with her relationship with the Zerg swarm. But this is also the story of a great war. The Caprulu sector, and of course StarCraft, always has war and bloodshed and ceaseless carnage. And that continues in this game. And we've got all the races there. We've got the Protoss and the Terran, and of course the Zerg. But finally, most importantly, this is the story of the Zerg swarm. We've never had a chance to look this closely into the swarm and see how it operates and what it's like to be a part of the swarm. So this is really our chance to look into the heart of the swarm. And with that, I will hand it over to Matt Morris.
Hello, everyone. My name is Matt Morris. I am the lead level designer on StarCraft 2, and today I'm going to talk about the Heart of the Swarm campaign and missions. Now, hopefully you all played the Wings of Liberty campaign. From a design approach, that game was about one man and a group of rebels trying to earn cash so that they could start a revolution. And when we started designing the missions, we designed those missions to be very strategic. We wanted to give you a sense that Raynor was way over his head, but still has a chance to, or basically pulls off a miracle. Kind of like when he liberated the Odin or snatched the artifact from the Protoss while the whole planet was being engulfed in flames. And so when we started talking about the Heart of the Swarm and the Zerg campaign, we knew that this game was much different. This game is about Kerrigan and the Zerg. And if you remember in Wings, when the Zerg showed up on a planet, it was terrifying. It was incredibly scary. And usually what happened is you tried to get off that planet because you know what was going to happen if you stayed there. And so when we started designing the missions, we wanted to capture that feeling. We wanted you to invade worlds. We wanted you to prevent people from escaping. And we wanted you to kill everyone on the planet because that's exactly what the Zerg do. Which brings me to one of the missions here that you could play at BlizzCon, War for the Brood. This is the type of mission you can expect from the campaign. This is about Kerrigan getting back the brood on Char. And she will race against Zagara, the brood mother that Brian had talked about, to collect unhatched eggs. And once Kerrigan has collected enough of these unhatched eggs, she will hatch a massive baneling army that she will then use to crush Zagara, thus gaining back the brood. Now, another mission we have here at BlizzCon, Silence Their Cries. This is another type of mission you can expect from the Zerg campaign. Kerrigan's going to come looking for one of her lost broods, and when she comes to this planet, she quickly learns about a flash freeze. And when this flash freeze hits, it immobilizes everything on the planet, except the indigenous creatures. So the Zerg begin killing these indigenous creatures, consuming their essence. And when they've gained enough of this essence, they will adapt, and they will evolve to overcome this flash freeze. So the next time it hits, they are no longer affected, which is really a core aspect about the Zerg, their ability to adapt and evolve to overcome all challenges. Now, we talked about already how you will evolve your units in this game. We have told you that when you complete missions, that you'll collect mutagen points, and that you will use those mutagen points here in the evolution pit to spend on mutations. Now, we got a lot of feedback on that, and we've done a lot of play testing ourselves. And we agree that this system feels too similar to the armory in Wings of Liberty. It's not Zergy. The Zerg aren't here to collect points and spend points. They're here to evolve. And so what we're doing now is we're actually unlocking the mutations as you play the game. So each unit that you come across in the evolution pit has 3 mutations. So there will be 3 unlocks for each unit in this game. And each mutation that you choose will impact the power of that unit, so that the next time you play with that unit in the next mission, you'll see that power. And this was starting to feel really good for us, except for we realized that once you got to the 3rd unlock, it kind of wasn't as epic as it could be. We were looking for something really cool. You're evolving the Zerg towards something. And so we came up with genetic splits. A genetic split is a choice to genetically change your unit into an entirely new Zerg unit. And so what you see before you is the Zergling split. You could choose to split your Zergling on the 3rd unlock into a Raptor or a Swarmling. If you choose a Raptor, your Zergling will grow these little wings, which allows them to jump up and down cliffs. It'll allow them to leap into combat, closing the distance on the enemy. Let me show you what that looks like in the game. And so these are normal Zerglings right now getting owned by bunkers and tanks. But you chose Raptors, so you can now come at the Terran defense from a new direction. And so you can see these Raptors just tearing apart this Terran defense. They'll leap on those trees.
Oh, shit.
And quickly just end this Terran base. They have no chance. Now, if you were to choose the Swarmling split, instead of your Zerglings morphing in 15 seconds, it'll be 1 second. And instead of having 2 Zerglings, you're going to get 3. And so you could quickly mass a really large army real quickly. Let me show you what that looks like. So here's a normal Terran attack coming against the base, and you got some Zerglings trying to defend it. You'd be in trouble at this point. You don't have any more units to guard your base. But you have Swarmlings. So each of these larvae is going to produce 3 Zerglings, and they're going to make a really large force quick. And you'll fend off this attack and actually have a large force to push against the enemy now. And so this really started scratching that itch for us. This is what you're doing in the game. You're evolving your units to an epic choice here. You're getting to choose an entirely new Zerg unit. Now, I left out one piece of information. This is the reward. This is the reward at the 3rd unlock. But once you get to the 3rd unlock, there's actually an evolutionary mission. And you'll launch a mission designed specifically for both these units. So you'll have a mission with the Raptors and Swarmlings. And once you complete that mission, you will then make that choice. Now, the last thing I'm talking about on the Heart of the Swarm today is destruction of worlds. Up at this point, I've been talking about how you could evolve the Zerg, each unit individually. But this is a way to evolve the swarm, destruction of worlds. As you play this game, you'll get contacted by old broodmothers, and they'll want to come back to the swarm. And so you'll start getting stronger and stronger. And at some point, Isha will say, you know what, I've identified 4 worlds to destroy. And the reason why the Zerg destroy worlds is because every world has a benefit to the Zerg. One world might increase the mineral harvesting of your drones, or another world might increase the gas harvesting of your drones, or increase the larva regeneration rate of the hatcheries, or the supply of your overlords. But it's up to you which world you want to destroy. And so this is what the Heart of the Swarm is all about. This is a game about evolving. This is evolving your units. This is about evolving the swarm and taking over the galaxy. Thank you.
Good job, boys. At this time, feel free to queue up for Q&A. Moderators? Oh, there we go. Right in the middle, y'all.
So right up.
Here we go.
A little bit to this side.
Hello, I'm Walter, and I've been playing StarCraft since '98, and I enjoyed Brood War, but my favorite character has disappeared. And I wonder if he'll make a comeback in this expansion. His name is Duran. And he has a role to play. I've gathered that he's an agent for the Dark Voice. So will we be seeing him?
Duran is definitely a part of the StarCraft universe, and so I wouldn't worry. He hasn't been forgotten or just swept to the side. He definitely has a part to play in the bigger story of StarCraft 2.
It's possible you might have met him already. You totally did, by the way.
My name is Martin Solis with Big Crits, and I have a question about Kerrigan. You said that Kerrigan doesn't remember everything, and that she only remembers some of the more intense moments. Would those moments include her killing Phoenix and General Duke? And does she have that guilt to bear? And how will Jim Raynor accept her after he killed those two, especially Phoenix, because they became great friends?
Right. That is definitely something that comes up between them in the game. I wouldn't say that she specifically remembers the moment that she killed Phoenix, but the guilt of everything that she's done. She remembers some of the things, and she's heard about others. She is aware of all of the terrible things and sins that weigh on her. So her guilt is immense, and that's something she really has to deal with in the game. But that's definitely something that those two characters still have yet to explore.
I would say too, on the Raynor front, you know, love can make a man do and think really stupid stuff. And Jimmy's got it bad for this girl. So I think to some degree, it wasn't her. She's possessed by an alien entity, right? It wasn't her. So potentially it's a very interesting theme, and the way that plays out, I guess you just have to wait. But you bring up really good points, and they are absolutely things that are going to have to be resolved between these two crazy kids before, well, certainly before the Protoss campaign. So.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this story on some level is about identity. You know, it's about how much responsibility you bear for things that you've done, and you know what you can do to make up for it. What is your identity, right? Are you human or alien? There's a lot of stuff like that with Kerrigan.
Yeah, it's innate to what StarCraft is, right? Whether it's these two goofy kids or whether it's these races that do what they need to do to survive. You know, the idea of redemption, right? Like, are there times when you go too far? Can any sin be forgiven, right? I think it's innate to this storyline and to how these people relate to each other, right? At some level, he just wants to believe the best about this girl. The trick about Heart of the Swarm is what she believes about herself. Ultimately, we're going to find out.
Hi, guys. So we saw in the campaign trailer that Kerrigan is fueled by vengeance against Arcturus Minx. But now that she's back to being Sarah Kerrigan, how does she feel about Jim Raynor's group and the Protoss race in general?
I would say there's a lot of mixed feelings there. I think the one big thing that she's very aware of, as far as Terrans in general, Protoss in general, as far as the entire Caprulu sector, is that she's public enemy number one. You know, there's a lot of people who don't care what she looks like. They hold her responsible for all of the things the Queen of Blades did. So she definitely is aware that almost everybody out there wants to kill her. So that's going to color all of her feelings, I think.
Right. And I would just say on top of that, one of the other innate themes is this girl who's suddenly human, that's only ever been manipulated, you know, since she was a little girl, whether it was government programs or the charismatic rebel leader whose lieutenant she was, or the evil alien overlord. She's never had her own identity. She has never made her own decisions. And now that she's suddenly human again, given partial memory of the atrocities she's caused, suddenly right in front of her are two vectors. There is this man that she loves, and there is this man that she hates. And in the midst of all that tension, right, is where she will begin to define her own path, finally, right? And boy, I hope it ends well for these kids, because I love them. But, you know.
But they live in a very bad place.
Very bad
Caprulu
world.
sector. Nobody ever dies in bed in the Caprulu sector.
So at the end of Brood War, we had a glimpse of the possibility of the Zerg swarm attacking Earth, leaving the Caprulu sector. Is that potentially going to come into play as part of Heart of the Swarm?
I would say no. But that's an idea that geeks us all up. I mean, it's just one of the long-term running, you know, what would happen one day, you know, if we get back to Earth and the Zerg are raining from the sky. It's a very compelling visual. It's a very compelling thematic. But the events of the next few chapters pretty much take place in the old stomping grounds of the Caprulu sector. So maybe a little more down the road.
Hi, everyone. I'd like to know what role Nova is going to play in the campaign and how often you'll see her.
Well, she definitely shows up. I mean, you've seen her in a teaser or two, probably. So she has a role to play. This is the Zerg expansion, though, so the focus is definitely on Kerrigan and the Swarm. She's obviously, you know, very much a human character, but she's an important part of the StarCraft universe, and so there's no doubt that she will be a part of this campaign, and she will have a role in all future StarCraft expansions or stories. But yeah, mostly we're looking at the Zerg with this one.
I would say from the mission side, we actually look at her as a really cool character, and we're always hitting up the story guys going, hey, can we use her here? Can we use her here? Because she's really cool. And so we're always trying to get her in there. We'll see what happens.
Hey, I was a big fan of the Tauren Marine and his flying porta potty. I was wondering, since we have 2 playable levels here, should we be looking for Easter eggs, or is it not worth exploring the entire map?
It's always worth exploring the entire map.
Spoken like a true level designer, by the way. There's nothing there, but you should see everything.
I would say that we're always trying to put everything we can in the map. So I don't want to give any secrets away, and I would say enjoy looking for them.
Hi. My first question was stolen by the first guy about Duran, and I wanted to know where he was. But I was wondering if he had any connection to Narud, the Mobius Factor guy in charge from, like, the mission where you're trying to destroy the buildings with the medivacs. Narud.
Narud
Yes.
Duran.
Duran spelled backwards.
Narud Duran.
Just wanted to prove that. Thanks.
He's crafty, that
Yeah.
Duran
Smart
/ Narut.
All right. This is something that has actually been on my mind since I first started playing the Terran campaign for StarCraft. I know you have a lot of points where you have split decisions, and those split decisions have significant impacts in the StarCraft universe, such as Dr. Ariel Hansen either getting killed or she inherits her own world with her people and to continue on that. So how are the writers going to handle that in the expansion? Are they just going to pick and choose which timeline they find suits their purposes best? Or how's that going to... I mean, I noticed that in the campaign, as I was playing the demo, they mentioned flooding the tunnels, and that was... You had a choice, either flood the tunnels or destroy the air force of the Zerg. And I noticed that they picked flood the tunnels as one of the choices to continue the storyline. And that's kind of nominal in consequences as compared to some of the bigger decisions. So how are they going to handle those?
So I'm going to say something that might get me in trouble if the technology doesn't back me up on this. But we are actually planning to bring your choices forward into the game. So if you didn't make a choice, if you didn't, for instance, if you're playing Heart of the Swarm and you didn't finish Wings of Liberty, you didn't reach the point where you had to choose between the tunnels or the platform, then we have the canon choice, which is always the A choice. In that case, it was flood the tunnels. But if you played Wings of Liberty and you made that choice, and we can detect it somewhere on BattleNet or on your computer, then we will bring that choice forward into the game. And so the line that you would hear Zagara say in that scene would be different if you had chosen to attack the platform. Now that said, this again is the Zerg campaign, and some of those choices, Tosh and Hansen, were very human Terran-centric choices. So I can't say that the choice will have a huge impact on the game, but you will hear references in different places to the game. In the game, you'll hear references to the choices that you made.
Thank you.
So one of the best aspects of the Terran campaign was how you got to see a lot of Dominion society, especially through Vermilion's newscast, and also just Raynor interacting with his shipmates. The problem is there are very few self-aware Zerg. I know you're creating a couple of characters, but even so, the cast is much smaller compared to the Terran campaign and I guess the upcoming Protoss campaign. So how are you planning to address that, adding a kind of empty world with few characters? Are we going to see a lot of human and Protoss characters to make up for the lack of Zerg characters, or are you introducing more, or are you just going to kind of go with as few characters as possible?
I remember you from last year. Hi. I don't think story mode is going to be that empty. We do have quite a few characters that inhabit it. We've started to find ways to have Zerg here and there that have their own sentience and have their own opinions and who Kerrigan can play off of and react to. And she definitely, there are other races that she interacts with. But I think, as as I said earlier, this is our chance to really explore the Zerg swarm and see it far closer than we ever have before. So I think we found a lot of cool ways to talk to different characters in the story.
I guess I'd say as well, I think that's exactly right. But when you look at Wings of Liberty, it's a human universe. You've got newscasts, you've got ambient storytelling, you've got jukeboxes, right? You got everything. And all of that helps to really just create that sense of world. But I think it's wise not to necessarily go into Heart of the Swarm thinking that those mechanics will be one-to-one, because there are a lot of ways to shape your sense of world. That was their only function. So the idea is newscasts necessarily running throughout a Zerg storyline, you don't need them. Jukebox, I would love to get that damn jukebox in there somewhere.
Infested.
Tentacles, whatever, be mega. So the idea is you just want that sense of immersion. You want that sense that, like, I'm really in the context of what it is to be Zerg. And so that's where stuff like what Matt's talking about is, like, dominating worlds, and like as we're in these story mode spaces in between missions, there are other dials to be twisted in terms of immersing you in that space. It just won't necessarily be the same gimmicks that worked well in the Terran
find out about the Zerg from this interaction. And that's a big part of this story mode space.
Bam.
How you doing? My name's AJ. I've been playing since '95. I've realized one thing: the Protoss never forget, especially when it comes to their leaders like Phoenix and Tassadar, who in fact died and came back and died again. My question is, how is this going to affect them with Kerrigan coming back into the scene? I sense there might be more hostility towards them, but what kind of reaction are the Protoss going to have, and how much more intensity are they going to feel towards her coming back into the storyline for the Terran and Raynor?
A lot. They're pissed. She's horrible. She's a terrible person. I don't think so, but she's done terrible things. The Protoss are not at all happy about this girl running off scot-free. They're not happy at all. I imagine there's going to be shenanigans.
I imagine there will. Unrestrained rage would be the phrase I'd use.
Hi, my name's Stan, and I've been playing since I was 8. And I have a question about the UED. What have they been doing since the end of Brood War and the transmission that they got? And what has Stukov been up to since the end of Brood War? Like, has
Owe me
the
$5. It took him at least. We got 13 minutes left. That was the first Stukov question.
Yep. It just cost me $5.
So the UED has to be up to something, right? Because like they know that their force got defeated by the Dominion and the Alliance and everything. So, yeah.
The UED is they're still out there. I mean, you know, they're still a part of the StarCraft universe. But I would say that they kind of got their butt handed to them 4 years ago.
There's not much butt left.
Yeah, I think it's going to take them a little while to decide to come back to the Caprulu sector. They have a lot of their own stuff going on. So it's something that we'll be hearing from in the future. But right now, this story is definitely more Caprulu sector focused.
And Brian, what about Alexei Stukov?
What about him, Chris?
Well, is Blizzard doing anything with Stukov in this campaign? I want to be in the know.
I'll say that Heart of the Swarm has a lot of characters in it. It has some new characters.
Dance!
It has some old returning characters, not Tychus. And
that's a damn shame.
Before you ask,
I'm coming back, Jimmy.
Infested Tychus. No, but there are some old favorites who show up, and I think as you play the campaign, you'll meet a few, and I hope that you'll be pleasantly surprised. Stukov did die, though. You know that, right? They shot his body out into space. And then, I know, he came back to life, too. Not everyone knows that.
Going back to Wings of Liberty, it seems really clear that Kerrigan is resigned to her fate because she's seen the prophecies of doom. She realizes that an overwhelming force is coming and is going to wipe out pretty much everyone in the Caprulu sector. So one of the things that confused me, and maybe this is a silly question, but why does she necessarily care about what the Mobius Foundation is doing if she knows that, you know, we're all going to die? Is it simply that she wants to meet that overwhelming force on the Zerg's own terms and go out on a blaze of glory? And also, in terms of leading into Heart of the Swarm, is she aware that she is literally and figuratively the queen on the chessboard as far as the larger battle that is yet to come on the horizon?
Fantastic question, by the way.
Yes, and what's really great is you actually answered it correctly, the first half. Yes, the Queen of Blades in Wings of Liberty was sort of resigned to the fact that everyone was going to die, but she was preparing the swarm to meet the threat, not out of any kindness or, you know, trying to do the galaxy a favor, but because that's what Zerg do. They're not going to lay down and die. So she wanted to lead the swarm into the great final battle that she saw in her head, even though she was convinced that they were going to lose. So that's why she did not want the Mobius Foundation to get its hands on that artifact. As to the second part of the question,
I think relative to the second part of the question, I can't remember the damn question. I remember the theme though. Was it something like, do these things echo forward? Was that it?
Is Kerrigan aware that she's the queen on the chessboard, that it's all on her in terms of tilting the tides of battle?
I think that she does not necessarily understand. Nobody does yet, except Zeratul. She doesn't understand what's really going on. And suddenly the context of her life has absolutely changed or transformed, pardon the pun. She's not a lot worried about all that yet. She's got way more immediate things to deal with. But certainly the themes you're talking about and the more prophetic component of StarCraft II and its mythology are very definitely all echoing forward. That story ain't over yet.
it's still going. And I think Kerrigan is the most complex character that we've, I think, that we've ever really tried to tell a story about. She does. I would say she doesn't consciously remember all of the stuff that she had discovered as the Queen of Blades, but she's aware of it on some level. I think there are forces that are driving this woman in certain directions, and that's why she's so complex. She's a conflicted character, you know, who sometimes wants to go left, and then sometimes she wants to go right, and she's all of this is because she's coming to grips with her identity and who she is and what she's done and what she is going to do next.
Hi, my question pertains to the Protoss-Zerg hybrids that we were introduced to during the Protoss interlude in Wings of Liberty. I'm curious how much impact they're going to have in Heart of the Swarm. Are we going to see a lot of development of that storyline, or are they just going to be kind of set aside until the Protoss campaign?
Do you think they're going to be set aside? Come on now.
You will see hybrids. You will see a lot of hybrids. And they will do mean things to you.
They are ill-tempered.
Hey guys, Clutch from Major League Gaming here. Thanks for creating such a great game. As you've seen, it's exploded competitively. My question, being a lore nerd, is will we see any characters from the books like Michael Liberty or Jake Ramsey make a physical appearance in the games?
It's possible. Again, most of the characters from the books are Terrans, and so it would be hard to try to wedge them into a story about the Swarm. But you know, definitely we're in very close touch with the publishing team, and you know, they play all the games, and we read all the stuff that they work on. So we're always happy to try to bring the expanded universe into the game in any way possible.
It really depends on function, right? Like Matt said earlier, these guys are hooking maps and ideas. They're like, you know what we could use right here is a ghost. Oh yeah, well we got this girl named Nova. You guys should use her. You know, so it's really a matter of, you know, necessity meets geek, and you know, some of these magic moments happen, but. You know, relative to developing Heart of the Swarm or Legacy of the Void, like I don't know that we go out of our way to try and get one of those characters in there, unless it felt like the trajectory of the mission flow and the storyline, you know, yeah.
I will announce something that we haven't ever said externally before. It's not a huge thing, but there was a short story about a Terran character named Amanda Haley, and she ultimately became Isha, who you just saw in the presentation. So Isha started her life as Amanda Haley.
Hello. I don't know if I'm reading too much into it, but in the recent book Spectres, there's a character called Cole Bennett, and he has the ability to implant memories to evade people, but he also said he's a chameleon. And I wonder if I'm reading in too deeply, or if he actually has the ability to kind of change how he looks.
Meaning, is he packing Zerg DNA?
Or if he's somewhat anything like Duran, because he can change how he looks.
There's like a 2% chance I could be wrong, so I'm not going to answer the question. I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but
Because then it becomes canon.
Because then it's canon, and are we stupid? So, well, maybe we're stupid anyway.
I will say there's a 98% chance that he is actually changing people's perception of him and not undergoing a physical.
Right. Well done, Brian.
Thank you. We have time for just a few more questions.
Hello. I'm wondering, what is the Protoss going to do about the Zerg in this new game?
They are going to try to kill the Zerg any chance they get. Anytime they see him, it's going to be a throwdown.
One of the missions we have right here at BlizzCon actually has them going against Protoss, so you can kind of start seeing where they're coming at and their motives against the Zerg.
Hello again. I have one more question. I read in a manga that I think you, Chris, wrote about the life Raynor had before StarCraft 1, where he had a wife and a son who was recruited into the Ghosts and then died in transport. I was wondering, in the future, is his son going to become part of the story, or is there going to be some sort of closure, or am I just reading in too much into it?
No, dude. I mean, those breadcrumbs are left on the ground on purpose. I think relative to Heart of the Swarm and Legacy of the Void, we've got a pretty ironclad plan for these games. So, if there was a potential for Raynor's gifted boy to be alive and on the payroll of the Dominion, I think that is a fascinating hook. But I can tell you, it doesn't currently play into our plan. Which isn't to say it shouldn't or it couldn't. But I don't know. It sounds like a cool hook. So, and we're all kind of excited about the potential of it. But for now, we're just going to focus on Jim and our girl Sarah, and we'll see what happens with the ghost of his boy. Haha. You like that?
Yes.
That pun?
That sounds like a title.
Last question.
One, thanks for making all these great games. Secondly, we've seen the hybrids. They mind-controlled the Templars. They brainwashed the hive mind. What's simply stopping them from going into the governments again and pretty much put a civil war in before they show up and kick everybody's ass?
How do you know they aren't doing that right now?
Because I don't want them to. It's going to screw everything up.
We got you. Don't worry. We got you. No, it's an interesting question, right? These guys can insinuate themselves into anywhere. How do I answer that? There's about 100 ways to answer that.
We win?
Because I just start going, oh, God, that'd be bitching. We should go left and right. There's all sorts of ways to chase that idea, and maybe we should. But for purposes, kind of like the Raynor kid question, for purposes of Heart of the Swarm and Legacy of the Void, it's not something we're necessarily chasing, but that sounds like pretty cool fiction. If someone had the wherewithal to chase that down.
Okay. Thank you.
How about one last round of applause for our panelists?
Thanks for coming, everybody. Have fun at BlizzCon.
Thank you.
Thank you for attending the StarCraft II Heart of the Swarm campaign and lore panel. Coming up next at 3:15 here on the development stage is a StarCraft II multiplayer panel. And at 3:30 on the main stage is the World of Warcraft Dungeon and Raids panel.
StarCraft 2 multiplayer will begin in 5 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, presenting the panel for StarCraft 2 multiplayer, put your hands together for the StarCraft 2 balance team.
Hey everybody, my name is Dustin Browder. I'm the game director on StarCraft 2. Thank you, thank you. And it's my pleasure to share the stage with some of the smartest guys I've ever worked with. This is David Kim. Give it up for David. David is the balance designer, currently working really hard for us on StarCraft 2 and Heart of the Swarm. And this is Josh Mankey, PhD and local genius. Mankey is responsible for a lot of the stats that we use in BattleNet. He's also responsible for the ladder system that we all play in every day. So here's what we're going to do here today. We're going to talk a little bit about where we're at in balance in Wings of Liberty, what we have just seen recently, what we're hoping to see for the future, give you guys a look into the numbers and into the process that we use inside Blizzard Entertainment, and then we're going to give you a look at what's going on in Heart of the Swarm, what our current plans are for Heart of the Swarm. And I think if we do our job right here, we'll have a ton of time for questions for you guys. So please get ready, and we'll hopefully have a long Q&A session where you guys can ask us anything you want to ask us about Wings of Liberty or about Heart of the Swarm. All right, let's take a quick look at global balance and where we're at right now in Wings of Liberty. So Terran versus Zerg right now, and this is across everyone in the world, all leagues, all divisions, is pretty even, within 1 or 2 percentage points in any given area of the world on any given day. Protoss versus Zerg, all over the world again, is again very, very even for us. So we're seeing good results in these. And then the very contentious Terran versus Protoss, strangely, is actually very even. Looking at all leagues and all ladders. I know, I'll get to it. Don't worry. It's fine. But again, remember, this is bronze all the way through Grandmaster. So some of the bronze guys are getting in there, and if they're having a better experience, that's diluting the rest of the pool. So let's take a look at the Masters balance. This is another way we like to look at the game. Obviously, we want the game to be balanced at all levels if possible. That's our ultimate goal. All the way from the bronze guy who just bought the game, all the way up to the guy who's playing here today in a tournament. We want to do the best we can. But Masters level often tells us, Masters and Grandmasters, often tells us things that we don't see when we look at that big a pool like we just showed you. So Terran versus Zerg, once again, is pretty even. This one seems to be working out for us, and this seems to be historically fairly true for us for many months now. Protoss versus Zerg does have one problem. Zerg dominance, but only if you're European. If you're anywhere else, you're fine. But if you're in Europe and you're playing, against the Zerg as Protoss, you're behind statistically by about 10% on any given day. So that's a little bit of a concern to us. Again, it's hard to know. Masters and Grandmasters is ultimately a pretty small pool. And we see big swings in these numbers depending, honestly, on who logged in on a given day or any changes that happen in the metagame in this matchup. Now, here's the scary one. You ready? Terran versus Protoss. Terran, definitely, but only if you're Korean. If you live in North America or Europe, you're doing okay. But if you live in Korea, you're behind by, again, about 10 to 12 percentage points on any given day. So these would be our two concerns going forward.
So before we get into the tournament data, I just want to point out that we do try to look at every single major tournament out there, and we do take every single major tournament very seriously. We don't just look at one tournament when making a move. So let's take a look at some of the most recent tournaments that happened. All 6 of these tournaments happened, I think, either this month or very close to this month. So it's as recent of a data that you can get as possible. So in GSL Code S, as everyone already knows, Terran is very overpowered. We're seeing a heavy Terran dominance in this tournament specifically. GSL Code A, however, we're not seeing this. We're seeing even matchups for all 3 races. IEM Guangzhou, we're also seeing even numbers, but one thing to know about IEM is while it's a very major tournament, the scale of the tournament is not as big as some of these other tournaments that we're mentioning. So it may be a little biased than some of the other tournaments. IEM New York, we saw that Zerg was dominating. IPL, even though it was a ZVZ finals, we felt like Terrans were competing fairly well against both races, but Protoss weakness definitely stood out in this tournament. And in MLG Orlando, one of our favorite tournaments out of all the tournaments out there, we're seeing even numbers here as well. So now let's take a look at our balance process by taking Protoss versus Terran as an example. So before 1.4, as we pointed out before that on the adjusted rating side, we weren't seeing too many problems except in Europe and Korea at the highest levels. But it's not the only thing we take into consideration when making balanced decisions. We do try to look at community feedback as well as pro feedback very heavily. On the community side, we were getting a lot of feedback saying Protoss is a little too weak against Terrans overall. Pros, however, were going a little stronger in this feedback, and a lot of pros were actually saying Protoss almost has no chance against Terrans, especially versus the 1-1-1 all-in strategy. So what this strategy is it's a strategy of going one barracks, one factory, one starport, opening up that way, and then saving up a lot of Marines, siege tanks, as well as Banshees, and pushing with almost half of your workers also, going for an all-in attack. So after doing some more analysis, we realized 1-1-1 is a little too strong and that we should deal with it. We would... And we were also noticing that EMP might be a little too strong as well, but because of the 1-1-1 all-in strategy being too powerful, we noticed it's difficult to really gauge the strength of EMP in the late game because most Protoss players were going into the late game at a bit of a disadvantage because they have to prep against the 1-1-1 strategy every single game by really overbuilding the tier 1 or tier 2 units. So the buff that we chose was a range buff for the Immortal. We went from 5 attack range to 6 in 1.4 patch. And the reason we chose this change was because the Immortal wasn't used heavily outside of the PvP matchup before 1.4. And when choosing changes in general, we do try to go for the smallest change possible. Because we believe the current state of the game is very solid, so we don't really want to make drastic steps that would really flip the matchup in favor of the other race. So after 1.4 came out, after the Immortal change came out, we were noticing a lot of improved feedback from both community and pros. There were still some negative feedback, but for the most part, everything has improved quite a bit. And especially on the pro side, a lot of Protoss pros were saying 1-1-1 isn't a problem anymore, and any equal skill Protoss player should be able to deal with this all-in rush as long as they can prepare for it. We also saw some improved tournament results as well. For example, just last weekend at MLG Orlando, we saw Hawk pull off the crazy win. I don't think he even dropped down to the lower brackets, and he just won the whole tournament. And we also saw that in second place was MC, who was also a Protoss player. And while one tournament is not really enough evidence to really show that Protoss is okay now, we believed this small example actually helps us. So on the rating side, we're still unsure, and the reason is because every time we release a patch, the ratings tend to fluctuate a little bit, so it takes time for it to settle down. So after a couple weeks or so, we'll be able to know for sure how the ratings have changed. So currently, we're looking at a lot of these other factors. So just to summarize what we talked about before, on the rating side, we saw that Zerg was a little too strong against Protoss in Europe at the highest levels. We also saw that Terran was a little strong against Protoss in Korea alone. On the tournament side, we saw both Zerg and Terran strengths in some tournaments, but we also saw that Protoss was kind of weak in another tournament. So one of the things that we're trying to do for Protoss versus Terran is we want to reduce the radius of EMP because we believe the pure raw damage caused by EMP against Protoss is a little too strong. So for example, if you hit like 10 units with a single EMP right now, you do 1,000 damage, which is pretty much the strongest burst damage spell you have in the game. We're also looking at a more general Protoss buff so that Protoss in general can be more competitive against the two other races. So on this side, we want to try to decrease the upgrade costs, the forge upgrade costs for the level 2, level 3, and shield upgrades in general, so that Protoss just gets this just general upgrade.
All right, so that's where we think we're at right now, kind of, with Wings of Liberty. We're obviously exploring a lot of different options of things we can do going forward, and we're really watching this very closely. We have to be very, very careful. These guys that are playing here in the tournament today, the guys that are playing in tournaments all over the world, are giving us feedback that we're close to a happy place for most of these matchups, but at the same time, we're definitely seeing some stuff we want to change, so we're sort of inching up on changes as we go. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about Wings of Liberty design in general, what we're seeing when we're playing Wings of Liberty, when we're watching you guys play Wings of Liberty, and sort of the things that we want to do for Heart of the Swarm based on what we learned from Wings. So there are some core race weaknesses in Wings of Liberty that we're not all that happy with. For example, Zerg really have a problem pushing an advantage in Tier 2. If the Zerg get kind of ahead, their really one solution is to expand. That's really all they've got. And that can go badly for them very quickly if the enemy out-techs them or if they fail to gain enough board control. We have some matchups that are a little bit stale. Zerg versus Zerg is one that's commonly cited to me. I've had other people say it's not the case, but I've also had people say Protoss versus Protoss. So anything we can do to sort of shake up these matchups and try to make them feel a little bit more diverse is something we're going to try to target. And of course, we have some missed opportunities in Wings of Liberty. Some units that we were hopeful for that would do something for us, and right now we just kind of want them to do a little bit more. They're not quite carrying their weight in the game. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to fix the weaknesses, we're going to fix the matchups, and we're going to fix and or replace some units. All right, so one thing I want to remind you guys, this is absolutely work in progress stuff that we're talking about here today. It's work in progress stuff you are seeing out there on the show floor. Nothing is final here today. And as proof of this, I'm going to show you some units that didn't make the cut in Wings of Liberty. This is a Protoss Soul Hunter or Purifier. His name changed a couple of times. It's a full piece of concept art that Sammy did for us. He had a full model in game. He had about a month worth of balance go into him. He didn't make it. He wasn't good enough. We had a Protoss Spore Beast. Again, tons of art, tons of effort, tons of balance, months of work, chopped. Didn't really work out for us in the end. It was kind of a fun unit, not fun enough. And we had a Protoss Adept. He could actually throw that shield there. It was a early tier unit for the Protoss that could engage at range. Too similar to the Marine. Never found mechanics we really wanted to work for it. Despite months of work, it was absolutely cut. So one of the things that we love about coming to BlizzCon is we can get your feedback here. We can get it from you when you come talk to us. We can get it at the stations out there. We can get it on the forums afterwards. This is one of the great things about this convention for us, is we can come to a place where we can put our stuff out there before it's quite ready for beta, but we can learn from you what you think is working and not working. I got some good feedback from day 9 last night, actually. It was pretty cool. And beta, of course, will tell us a ton more. Just like every other game we've ever done, we will have a full beta for Heart of the Swarm, which will give us the real deal on how these units are actually going to function in really sort of live competitive play.
So now we'll talk about each race's weaknesses in Wings of Liberty and go into some detail about how we decided to fix these issues in Heart of the Swarm. So let's first start off with Terrans, what issues they're facing in Wings of Liberty, and the new units that can hopefully solve those problems. So Thor is supposed to be the best counter to mass mutalisks, but it suffers from 2 problems. One is the size of the unit is so big that it's easy to get the Thor stuck in between your own buildings and or your units. The second problem is due to the high cost of the unit, you can't reasonably bring out more than 1 or 2 Thors in general against the mass mutalisks, which means if you're ever caught off position, the mutalisks can easily spread out and magic box the Thor to kill them one by one. The second issue that Terrans are facing is the late game mass charge zealot problem. Currently in Wings, the Terran players get around to this problem by using Marines, Marauders, Stimpak, and kiting heavily in the late game. And while we think this sort of micro is very fun to have for the game, especially in the earlier mid-games, we kind of wish in Heart of the Swarm, if the Terrans had an option to switch out into something different that they can deal with just straight up against the Zealots, that might introduce more choices to the Terran players and create more interesting gameplay. Terrans have a lot of options, whether it's harassing enemy bases, defending your own expansions, just spreading out your army into different choke points, or